Of all the superheroes out there, none are quite as iconic or as beloved as Batman. For over 80 years, the Caped Crusader has entertained fans through movies, television, video games, and of course, the comics. Batman is one of the few superheroes that is basically critic-proof. It can be the worst adaptation of The Dark Knight ever, but it's still going to sell, because it's Batman. Over the years, the hero has gathered a slew of memorable allies and arguably the greatest villain roster of all time. Marvel has even taken inspiration from the legendary character, adding some of his qualities to heroes like Daredevil and Moon Knight. But with the impact that Batman has left in various industries, no one really questions what inspired the icon himself. In his book, Batman and Me, Bob Kane explained that he and co-creator Bill Finger loved horror movies growing up, and took inspiration from them for many of the characters. The Frederick March adaptation of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde inspired the character of Two-Face. Hollywood bombshell Jean Harlow was the early inspiration for Catwoman. The character of Clayface was inspired off of Lon Chaney's Phantom of the Opera, and the name of his original alter ego, Basil Karloff, was taken from iconic horror actor Boris Karloff. And of course, the protagonist of The Man Who Laughs was the inspiration for, well, you know. As for the Caped Crusader himself, Kane has said in the book that the key inspiration was a film from 1930 called The Bat Whispers. While I do agree that the film played a role in the creation of The Dark Knight, the inspiration actually goes back further to a silent movie from 1926 titled The Bat, where the title character actually dresses like a bat, some of the text actually appears on the visuals like a comic book, and even the bat signal shows up. So, how did these movies come about, and why did Bob Kane get them mixed up? We'll look into them, but first, a little backstory on the woman that started it all. At the turn of the 19th century, there was a financial battle going on between Jacob Schiff, J.P. Morgan, and E.H. Harriman for complete control of the Northern Pacific Railway. Several brokers, especially Harriman, attempted to buy as many stocks as they could. By May 9, 1901, Northern Pacific shares rose to $1,000 each. What began as a promising day took a turn for the worst by the afternoon, creating one of the darkest days on Wall Street. The Panic of 1901. All the executives were eventually able to make a truce, but the damage was done. Several households across the country lost their savings in the shuffle, including a young family living in Philadelphia, led by Dr. Stanley Reinhardt and his wife, Mary Roberts. Born in 1876, Mary Ella Roberts developed a talent for writing stories at a very young age, but she soon put it aside to attend college at the Pittsburgh Training School for Nurses, where she met her husband and settled down. By the 1901 panic, the young couple already had 2 children and a third on the way. With the market crash, Mary was anxious to find a way to help her family through their financial struggles. So she picked up her pen and paper and began publishing short stories in magazines across the country. By 1903, at the age of 27, she had already written nearly 50 short stories, was helping her husband with his medical practice, raising a family, and still found time for her pen and paper. One day in 1907, her uncle came to visit from Ohio. He always loved reading Mary's stories, even when she was growing up. He asked her if she had written anything new for him to look at. Mary looked through her desk and found a battered old draft of one of her unpublished stories. By the end of the day, her uncle came to her and said, "Mary, this is a novel. You need to get this published." But Mary was reluctant. She didn't think this particular story was good enough to present to the readers. Nevertheless, her uncle was a well-read man and knew a good story when he saw it. So Mary took his advice. But which publisher should she go to? Mary couldn't choose. Finally, she decided to just grab a random book from her shelf and look up the publishing company inside. The book she chose was a novel by Anna Katharine Green, which had been published by the Bobbs Merrill Company in Indianapolis. Satisfied with her choice, Mary sent her manuscript off. Weeks later, Mary received a telegraph message saying that the publishers loved her book and would be happy to publish it. 1 year later, Mary Roberts Rinehart had officially published her first best-selling novel, The Circular Staircase, a mystery story about the strange occurrences taking place in a country house, which was currently rented for the summer by a spinster along with her niece and nephew. While enjoying the success of her novel, Mary was approached by the Selig Polyscope Company in 1915, asking for the rights to The Circular Staircase, hoping to adapt it into a feature film. Mary agreed, and the movie was released later that same year. Side fact, the production was led by silent film director Edward Lesaint, who's most recognized today as the judge from the Three Stooges short Disorder in the Court. The 1915 adaptation of The Circular Staircase was a hit when it first came out, but the film is considered lost today. It would mark the first feature-length adaptation of one of Mary's mystery novels. One night, during a business dinner with theater and film producer Edgar Selwyn, Mary asked him what would happen if she wrote a crime play where the audience was kept completely mystified and the solution was not forthcoming until practically the drop of the curtain. Selwyn said it would be worth $1 million. While writing the story for this new idea, however, World War I was in full swing, and Mary found herself constantly being distracted by her work for the U.S. Department of War. By 1918, she had only written the first 2 acts and was planning on heading for Europe to help the War Department as a war correspondent. Mary then turned to the assistance of a fellow writer and collaborator named Avery Hopwood. The two had met almost 10 years prior, after Mary had been approached by Broadway producers Lincoln Wagenholz and Colin Kemper about adapting one of her novellas for the stage. They wanted Mary to write the script, but the thought of going to New York and being away from her family for so long was too much for her. So, the producers suggested bringing Hopwood on to help. The two collaborated on the story, and the play officially premiered at the Astor Theater on November 10, 1909, making both Mary and Hopwood Broadway names. So it's no wonder that Mary trusted Hopwood to complete the 3rd act for this new play while she was overseas. Hopwood was interested, but he didn't feel right submitting the story without Mary's consent. When Mary finally did return to the States 1 year later, the two of them split their time between Pittsburgh and New York City until the script was finally finished. They reunited with Broadway producers Wagenholz and Kemper to help bring it to the stage. However, there was one problem. The story was too similar to The Circular Staircase, and as of 1920, the rights to the story were still owned by the Selig Polyscope Company, so Roberts and Hopwood had to change a few things to avoid a lawsuit. They changed the names of the characters and cut out a few from the novel. They even retitled the play as The Bat, since this new killer masqueraded as a bat. However, it's believed that the changes were not enough to sway the Selig Polyscope Company. The lawsuit was eventually dropped, but it's not clear why. Some speculate that Mary was able to buy the rights back to avoid legal disputes. But no matter how it was resolved, the Bat play hit the Broadway stage on August 23, 1920, and became an overnight sensation. Once again, film offers came pouring in to make the Bat into a movie. It's also rumored that because of the Bat's success, either the Selig Polyscope Company or an unknown pirating company tried to re-release The Circular Staircase under the title of The Bat to cash in on its popularity. The attempt was scrapped, however, when Wagenholz and Kemper threatened a lawsuit. As for the film offers, Mary Roberts and Avery Hopwood turned many of them down, including one from D.W. Griffith. Finally, in 1925, the playwrights were certain that they had found the man for the job, film director Roland West. West was no stranger to the entertainment industry. Both of his parents were actors, and his father was a playwright as well. By the age of 17, he was working full-time as an actor himself. In 1918, he was introduced to his future wife, actress Jewel Carmen. The couple moved from New York to L.A. in 1924, where West became an associate producer at United Artists. In 1925, he directed the silent film The Monster, starring Lon Chaney Sr. The movie was based on the 1924 Crane Wilbur stage play, which was often compared to The Bat. It may have been West's work on The Monster that ended up earning him the rights to Mary and Hopwood's script. It's said that West was a huge fan of the play, but when he couldn't get the rights before, he decided to make The Monster instead. But now he was able to purchase the rights to The Bat for a reported sum of $75,000. But West didn't want to make a replica of the stage play. He wanted to change a few things to make the film adaptation feel more fresh and unpredictable. To add to the secrecy, West made sure that the production sets were closed off to anyone outside the cast and crew. They even shot the film at night when the studio was empty, partially because it was easier to avoid the public eye during the working hours of the day, and partially to help the actors get more into the shady mood of the film. Even casting was kept from the media. The biggest name in the film was George Barringer, who had often worked with D.W. Griffith, though he was only given a small cameo at the beginning of the film. West believed this was the best strategy to avoid going over budget due to Barringer's demands to be the highest paid actor. British actress Emily Fitzroy received the role of Miss Cornelia Van Gorder, the woman who was renting the mansion which serves as the main setting for the movie. West's wife, Jewel Carmen, was cast as Dale Ogden, Miss Van Gorder's niece. Carmen retired from acting shortly after The Bat's release, making this her final role in cinema. Jack Pickford, the younger alcoholic brother of famous actor Mary Pickford, received the role of Brooks Bailey, a mysterious gardener who falls in love with Dale Ogden. Other veteran actors like comedian Luis Facenda received the role of Lizzie Allen, the quirky, nervous maid, and Arthur Houseman was cast in the role as Richard Fleming, a reckless, greedy man who hopes to frighten Miss Van Gorder and her family and staff from the mansion so that he can lease it. And finally, Italian actor Tullio Carminati was cast as Detective Moletti. The Bat officially marked his American cinema debut. But despite all the secrecy, West's Bat films soon became the talk of Hollywood. People were hyped. The movie even opens with a message asking the audience to keep the identity of the Bat a secret for future crowds. The film was finally released on March 14, 1926, and became a major success. After pulling off a robbery and murder, the mysterious Bat leaves a cocky note for the chief of police, saying that he's going to the country for a vacation. The Bat plans to rob the Oakdale Bank for his travel expenses, only to discover that another mysterious robber has beat him to it, stealing $200,000 from the bank's vault. The Bat chases the thief to a mansion in the countryside. The house is currently rented out by Miss Cornelia Van Gorder, who is just looking for some peace and quiet. That very night, a group of people, all with personal grudges and mysterious pasts, come to the mansion with unknown agendas. But their intentions are all interrupted when Detective Moletti arrives, in search of the Bat whom he believes is disguised as an alter ego while searching the house for the stolen $200,000. Today, aside from its connection to Batman, there is really nothing about this movie that stands out. It's just a dark house murder mystery movie. The only things that still hold up are the use of shadows, some of the camera angles, and the gothic atmosphere. I also have to tip my hat to the set design. These sets are huge. Just look at the size of that door. But to the casual viewer, all that matters are the little tropes connected to Batman. And there are quite a few. Dressing like a bat, the signal, the mansion, the Bat has a utility belt, drives a car, sets traps. And I would be very surprised if Eric Radomski and Bruce Timm did not take inspiration from the opening shot with the Bat's glowing eyes. Overall, The Bat quickly became one of Roland West's best-received films. Satisfied with the results, West planned to move on to his next project. But in 1927, a technological achievement was made that changed cinema forever.
Blue sky, smiling at me, me, nothing but little blue skies. Do I see, do, bluebird singing a song. Nothing but little bluebird all day long. You like that slapping business?
With the success of The Jazz Singer, sound pictures became the hot new topic of the industry. Soon, everyone was attempting to cash in on the commercialization. West was no exception. His first attempt at a talkie was Alibi in 1929, which received 3 award nominations from the newly developed Academy of Arts and Sciences. The nominations included Best Actor for Chester Morris and Best Picture. With the movie's success, West decided to revisit The Bat by making a talkie adaptation while he still owned the rights. The Bat Whispers was released on November 13, 1930, and basically followed the same plot as its predecessor, but with a few small differences. This time, the detective was played by Alibi's Chester Morris. The movie had a much bigger budget, and West had several cameramen on set to shoot the film in different versions, such as the traditional 35mm and the newly created 65mm widescreen version called Magnafilm. This was still the early years of sound pictures too, so there are times when the audio is very faint because the actors aren't standing directly underneath the mic. Aside from being a talkie, The Bat Whispers is basically a copy of the original film. But it still has some of its own inspiration to Batman. The city looks more like Gotham, and the camera angles and the shadows look more polished and more like a comic book as well. The Bat Whispers overall received mixed reviews, and the widescreen version was considered a financial failure. Nevertheless, it's most likely because of the similarities between the two films and the fact that they were both directed by the same man that led to Bob Kane getting them mixed up. Only one more theatrical adaptation of The Bat was released in 1959, starring Vincent Price, who would later play Egghead in the Adam West Batman TV series. So I guess that solidifies that every theatrical version of The Bat had some connection to The Dark Knight. And the inspiration is still being acknowledged today. In 2017, Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo created a new comic villain called the Batman Who Laughs, a combination between Batman and the Joker. The name was a merge from the titles of both films that inspired the original characters. In the end, we have the major success of Batman to thank for keeping these two movies alive. If you want to check them out for yourself, you can easily find them on YouTube. As for me, I'm going to give The Bat and The Bat Whispers 3 stars each. Guys, thank you so much for continuing to watch and support my videos. It really means a lot to me. And if you like this, you can click here and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.